Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Very glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have once again successfully made it to the end of another week, and we have good, bad, and crazy martinis to get to today. One will be about the fight over spending and whether the government will shut down. That's the good martini, certainly in multiple ways. Then we're going to take a look at Virginia statewide elections in 2025. That's a little bit dicier. And then we will be taking a look at kind of a macabre trend in the House of Representatives and some other aspects of the passing of a Democratic member of Congress. But let's start with the biggest news of the day, probably in Washington, and that is that probably the government's not going to shut down. We haven't had the vote in the Senate yet, but the fact that Chuck Schumer is now saying that he will support the Republicans' continuing resolution. John Fetterman's saying it, but something tells me Schumer wouldn't do it if he didn't already think it was going to pass without his vote. So here is Chuck Schumer, at least in part yesterday on the Senate floor.
I believe it is my job to make the best choice for the country, to minimize the harms to the American people. Therefore, I will vote to keep the government open and not shut it down. There is nobody in the world, nobody, who wants to shut the government down more than Donald Trump and more than Elon Musk. We should not give it to them. And make no mistake, Democrats will continue to fight what Donald Trump is doing.
Yes, Donald Trump wanted to shut down the government. That's why he castigated Thomas Massie the other day, and we talked about it at length. That's because clearly he wanted a government shutdown. Also, it's interesting that now the Democrats are the ones fighting it out in public between the leadership and the progressive wing. It's kind of the exact mirror image of Republican leaders and kind of the Freedom Caucus wing, Tea Party wing. So here's AOC getting invited to the set with Jake Tapper on CNN. Jake Tapper trying to bait her into a battle of words with Chuck Schumer, which she does not take, but she focuses on why she thinks Schumer's making the wrong move here.
Would you, what do you think of the job that Chuck Schumer is doing? Would you ever challenge him, do you think?
I think that what we need right now is a united Senate Democratic caucus that can stand up for this country and not vote for cloture and not vote for this bill. And I think that the strength that we have is in this moment. Reconciliation and all of these, Republicans do not need Democratic votes for that. They need it for this. And so the strength of our leadership in this moment is going to demonstrate the strength of our caucus. And I cannot urge enough how bad of an idea it is to empower and enable Donald Trump and Elon Musk in this moment. It is dangerous and it is reckless.
Well, it's not dangerous and reckless, but that might be one of her more coherent tactical analyses of what's going on. It's fun that the media is like, ooh, you're opposed to this move by Chuck Schumer. Are you going to challenge him for Senate? I don't ever remember Thomas Massie getting asked if he was going to run against Mitch McConnell, because the media loves when the Republicans who want to team up with Democrats to get the ball over the finish line, now they love the rebels because they don't want Trump to get a win here because they see this as a Republican bill. So Schumer is flailing. He's breaking out the cuss words here with Chris Hayes on MSNBC.
To have the conflict on the best ground we have summed up in a sentence that they're making the middle class pay for tax cuts for billionaires, it's much, much better not to be in the middle of a shutdown, which to divert people from the number one issue we have against these bastards, these people, which is not only all these cuts, but they're ruining democracy.
Ruining democracy. The people who are elected and voted a certain way are ruining democracy. So, Jim, the Democrats are clearly flailing here and flailing very publicly. They're fighting publicly. A lot of House Democrats making no hesitation in blasting the Senate for what appears to be avoiding the shutdown here. What do you make of it all?
You know, Greg, over the last decade, maybe even 2 decades, the Twitter hashtag Dems in disarray is often displayed sarcastically when there's Republican infighting. This is a genuine moment of Democrats being in disarray and really not figuring out how to adjust to life in the minority. I have long subscribed to the idea that there really is no such thing as winning a government shutdown fight. That in the end, most voters are a pox on both your houses. They hate to see the government shut down. They always get the news coverage of Elmwood Middle School that just wanted to visit the Smithsonian, that kind of, whether or not you think one side party or the other is right, Most people just want the government to keep operating. They get annoyed when they can't go to a national park or something like that. They get annoyed when they see the Washington Monument shut down. They're like, just work it out. Now, traditionally, Republicans, get more media criticism of it. But even like the one like for Obamacare or like in the Obama years, things, Democrats won that fight, and then healthcare.gov came out, and it very, very quickly, the whatever win you get out of a government shutdown fight gets overtaken by other events. And this one, I think Democrats are correct. They were not going to win this fight, not just because of the alliteration of Schumer shutdown, the fact that Republicans had passed it. There was a majority of Republicans votes for it, and the Democrats were effectively filibustering a bill that would have kept the government open for the next 7 months, and it had really no cuts. It was the same level of funding that had been, had been enacted in the past. But I'm going to say something that maybe this by itself counts as a crazy martini. Greg, is it possible AOC has a point in that they can't stop anything in the House, so the only leverage the Democrats really have is through the threat of the filibuster to stop stuff from getting through the Senate? Fact check, true. Now, whether they should have used it in this phase, I think, is a very debatable at minimum. But I just think, one, between her and that ferocity, right, that vehemence that she has there. And Greg, I don't know if you saw the pictures, but Chuck Schumer is sitting there in his giant overstuffed chair in the Senate press gallery. Looks like he's sitting in the Red Room in Twin Peaks, and he's saying, we're not going to stand for this. No, you're sitting right now. Schumer just does not look or sound like a guy who's ready to, go with it with brass knuckles up against the Trump administration. And he can, Elon Musk, and they're destroying him. He looks like an old, tired man who doesn't have very good cards to play. And I think it's not surprising that Democrats are outraged by this, because Democrats are used to having at least some form of leverage, and they really don't have very much. Schumer is picking his battles. It probably was long-term the wise choice, but it does not match the mood of the Democrat grassroots right now. I imagine at some point maybe we will see a challenge to him, and he's getting up there in year. He was back in the days of Biden and Pelosi, he was the young Democratic leader, not that young, and I just kind of get the feeling that there are a bunch of Democrats who feel like their party has been in abject surrender since Trump took over. And I don't think an event like the way this played out is going to do Schumer any favors, and just going to further irritate the Democratic grassroots against the current leaders of their party in Congress.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Chuck Schumer is not a good PR or social media figure. His Corona and avocado, that didn't work out well. Of course, he's most famous for putting cheese on a burger that hadn't been cooked yet. That time he was trying to act like a normal person on the 4th of July or whatever day that was. But you mentioned he didn't have a lot of great cards to play. We have so many good people with video. Can we swap out Zelensky and put in Schumer for that video? And then Trump talks about, you don't have the cards. You don't have the cards. So.
Unless you want a government shutdown, and unless you think, the media will do enough so that Trump gets the blame for us not voting for a continuing resolution that keeps the government open at current spending levels. If you think that, he could have tried it, and maybe it would have worked. I'm pretty skeptical, and probably the Democrats would be. The question is, do you want to surrender now, or do you want to surrender later? And, Schumer peeled off the Band-Aid as fast as possible.
We had this situation in 2017, early on in the first Trump administration, and the Republicans ended up folding because they didn't have 60 in the Senate. So a little more aggressive, a little more muscular approach from the GOP, got what they wanted. Still not the spending restraints that we would have liked, but compared to the hand that the Democrats had to play, definitely an upgrade from a few years ago. Well, the government not shutting down will probably be good news for a number of reasons, although some people were looking forward to Russell Vought running the government for a while over at OMB, which is what would have happened during a shutdown. But there's also good news for your business, especially if you're thinking about adding AI, artificial intelligence, and you're wondering how to do it and whether you can afford it, because it is pretty pricey. Because AI is everywhere, from driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. But the bottom line is you need a lot of speed and computing power, so you need a lot of energy, and that means costliness. And so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? By upgrading to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Its global network and flexible options will tackle your toughest business challenges. It's a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, with 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, all at one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing.
Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. This is for new U.S. customers with minimum financial commitment. The offer ends March 31st. So see if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, this is the bad martini now. We look to Virginia politics. When you live in Virginia, the campaign season never ends. The races change, of course, but they never end because Virginia has state elections in odd-numbered years, which means you go from federal election to state election to federal election to state election every single year. And Virginia, of course, has a one-term limit on their governors, so you always have an open seat every time there's a governor's race, which always comes the year after a presidential election. Now, historically, over close to the last 50 years, whichever party controls the White House loses the Virginia governor's race. The only exception to that in recent years is when, unfortunately, Terry McAuliffe beat Ken Cuccinelli right after Obama had gotten reelected. I think Cuccinelli probably would have been the best governor in our lifetimes in Virginia, but nonetheless, it did not happen. Glenn Youngkin, of course, managed to score a win over Terry McAuliffe trying to get back into the governor's office in 2021, thanks in part to not a lot of happiness with the Biden administration, and especially due to Terry McAuliffe saying that parents shouldn't have a say in what their kids are learning at school. But now, with Trump back in office, advantage Democrats. Remember that when Trump was in office the first time, Ralph Northam won by 9 points over Ed Gillespie, and you know what a rousing success the Ralph Northam administration was in Virginia. The presumptive Republican nominee this time is the Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears, who is someone I enthusiastically intend to vote for. The Democrats have pretty much cleared the field for former Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who's one of those quote-unquote moderates because she doesn't yell a lot, but almost always votes in lockstep. In fact, one time when she was running for re-election to Congress, she had a 100% voting record with Nancy Pelosi, which really shows independence. But now a race that had been dead even just after the 2024 election shows a 15-point lead for Abigail Spanberger, 39-24. So there's a lot of room for movement. But for a race that had been dead even in the low 40s, not a good sign. And of course, not only is it due to the fact that Republicans are in control in Washington, but going through the federal bureaucracy and eliminating tens of thousands of jobs, if the federal judges let them stand, is going to affect a lot of people in Northern Virginia. According to Just the News, Virginia has the second highest number of federal employees in the country, second only to California. Jim, this appears to be a very uphill climb for Virginia Republicans. The big three statewide races, governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general, and then every seat in the House of Delegates. More than a little nervous here. I think Winsome Sears is a fantastic candidate, but the deck is not stacked in her favor at this time. We got some time to maybe dig up some dirt on Abigail Spanberger and change the narrative a little bit, but the normal factors, the normal indicators are not on the GOP side.
You know, Greg, I'm glad you mentioned digging up dirt, because one of the things that's really extraordinarily frustrating about this trend is that it almost seems like candidate quality doesn't matter. And who knows, maybe if you'd done just a little more opposition research on Ralph Northam, things might have turned out differently. And really, for a while, it looked like Northam was going to be forced to resign, but then he was kind of put aside, put into kind of a state of sleeping. And then other Democrats got together and decided whether his governorship should be continued to be kept alive or it should be terminated. They decided to keep it alive because the other guy had allegedly sexually assaulted people and the other guy had blackface to it. Who hasn't worn blackface amongst Virginia Democrats, right? It was a hot trend back then. Everybody loved Michael Jackson, and the only way you can show that love is with shoe polish. So these are the folks who Republicans have lost to. And I remember talking to a guy who followed Virginia Republican politics very closely, and he pointed out not just like the governor's races. You look at the state legislative races, both House and Senate. If Trump won the Senate or House district, the Republican won in subsequent elections. If Trump lost the House or Senate, they lost. There was nobody who was defying the trend, that this was effectively a litmus test. And considering how close Trump had came last time, Virginia was not considered to be a swing state. And I remember on election night, we were waiting until my home county of Fairfax County finally came in with the votes to put Harris over the top. And you might have said, you know what? Okay, Winsome Sears, we got a good candidate. We got Miara is still running for attorney general. This is a good team. It's not looking great. And it's really frustrating. We shouldn't be shocked by it. As you said, this is the historical pattern. There's always the chance you can defy it, but I think you're definitely climbing uphill. You're swinging against the tide. And a Republican administration that is cutting the budget as much as it possibly can is going to complicate the lives of federal workers. And where you and I live, there are a whole bunch of federal workers. There are a bunch who are kind of right of center, but if you fire somebody, they're really not warm and fuzzy towards you. I think if you're a Democrat, you're probably feeling great about your odds in Virginia this year. And again, New Jersey was surprisingly close last cycle, but Democrats hung on. There's nobody good in New York City's mayor's race. So, dear God, Cuomo, look, I know people say that New York is in a rough spot. Right after the governor says things are going great, somebody gets set on fire on the subway. And I can understand if a New York City voter is feeling like they're groping for answers. But if you're groping for answers, Cuomo's not the answer. So it's mid-March. It's early. Things could get better. Things could turn around. But I think it's safe to say that in these off-year elections, the tide is against Republicans, and they have their work cut out for them for the rest of the year.
We were told after last election that if you voted against Kamala Harris, that you were anti-woman and anti-people of color. I am very excited to vote for Winsome Sears, Black woman, immigrant even, also a U.S. Marine Corps veteran. None of those things are the reason I'm voting for her. It's because she has a great conservative philosophy, and I think she would do a good job as governor. I think she's done a good job as lieutenant governor. And to her credit, this is not going to help her get elected, but to her credit, she's not using weasel words about DOGE and what Trump is doing here. She says, this is from the AP, quote, "The president was elected fully explaining what he was going to do. He didn't hide anything from anyone. The president, if I'm understanding right, what he's doing is he's assessing. He's making an audit of who's doing what, how they're doing it, where they are doing it, and how they're supposed to be doing it. Is it according to the law? Can we make some savings?" She says, no one likes bureaucracy. We want to get things done. And unfortunately, sometimes the government stands in the way of the people. So meanwhile, Glenn Youngkin says there are some state government openings, and federal workers who lose their jobs are more than welcome to apply for that. But Winsome Sears, you're going to take her or leave her, man. She's not going to pretend that she's not in favor of streamlining the government.
Greg, I fully expect that sometime between now and November, we will be hearing from Spanberger and Virginia Democrats that the only way to fight white supremacy is to vote against Winsome Sears.
Well, remember when Larry Elder was running in the recall against Gavin Newsom, and he was the black face of white supremacy?
That's right.
They're shameless. Absolutely shameless. So, yes, Virginia.
My guess is that message will come from Northam.
Virginia, I know you had nothing but pro-abortion ads aimed against Republicans. Every ad this year is going to have Elon Musk with the chainsaw from the CPAC conference, and that's going to be attached to every Republican candidate. So it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be quite a show, I'm sure. Well, in case you haven't noticed it yet, the temperatures are certainly getting nicer here in Northern Virginia and probably in many places around the country. Spring not officially here for another week, but you know what it's time for? Planting. And so Fast Growing Trees is the place to do that. It has the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. Fast Growing Trees offers a wide selection of plants, from fruit and privacy trees to shrubs, all tailored to your climate and your space.
Whether you're looking to add privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection, with plant experts on call to offer growing and care advice. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and anything else you need. No green thumb required.
That's good, because I certainly don't have a green thumb on either hand. So we have always had great experiences with Fast Growing Trees. We've had the monstera, the fig, the lemon. We just ordered the snake plant, and we're excited about that. So this spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, we use the code Martini at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms do apply. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And most folks probably don't remember this, but one of my predictions at the beginning of the year was that given the very narrow House majority for the Republicans and given the open seats that wouldn't be filled till later in the spring, it's possible that through very unfortunate things like accidents or health problems, the Democrats could potentially end up in the majority briefly until those special elections are held in those deep red districts. Well, It's exactly happened the opposite way. We talked last week about how Congressman Sylvester Turner from Texas passed away just hours after attending the president's speech to Congress last week. And now we find out, this one I think less surprising, but still very sad, Congressman Raul Grijalva of Arizona, he had announced he was fighting lung cancer last spring, passing away at the age of 77. So that's 2 seats, obviously, that will remain open until special elections are held. Unlike the Senate, there's no appointment. You actually let the election process play out. The creepy thing, Jim, here is that Grijalva's staff posted an explanation of why he was opposed to the Republican CR after it was announced that he was dead.
Please tell me this was pre-scheduled and somebody's oversight and not a congressional statement via Ouija board. Look, it's very sad for Congressman Grijalva. Thoughts and prayers to his family. Same with Congressman Sylvester Turner. The irony is the House and Senate have older members. This is, we've complained about those who are really getting up there in years. I don't think anyone would say necessarily that a cancer diagnosis is a reason why you should necessarily step down, but sometimes you don't win these fights, and it's very sad. Now, what's also, and again, people say, oh, how can you think about how this affects the balance of power at a time like this? It's just the numbers in the House are changing pretty rapidly. As of this morning, the House of Representatives has 218 Republicans, 213 Democrats, and now 4 vacancies. Now, 2 of those vacancies are going to be filled fairly quickly. Matt Gaetz did not take his seat. He resigned from Congress back in November. Mike Waltz is now President Trump's national security advisor, so he resigned his seat on January 20th. Florida will be holding 2 special House elections on April 1st. Insert all your April Fool's Day jokes here. And so by April 2nd or shortly thereafter, there should be 2 more House Republicans, getting them to 220 to 213, which is actually, as far as Mike Johnson's concerned, that's a huge margin. That's the best it's been in a while. As for Sylvester Turner's district, it's in Houston. It's heavily Democratic, but under Texas law, they don't usually supposed to do it on the next, uniform election day. They're scheduled to have local elections for May 3rd, so that'll probably shortly by early in May, you'll have another Democratic congressman added to the mix. And for Grijalva's seat, it's right up against the Mexican border. This is a heavily Democratic district, but under Arizona law, they're supposed to do it at the next general election if there is one. There isn't. They just had local elections on March 11th. So they're going to have one probably midsummer. They'll have a primary, and probably early autumn they'll have a general election. So that's a seat that's going to be empty for a while. One last one. I wrote about this in the corner, and I feel like this is, then you have Elise Stefanik, who is still in the House of Representatives. She has not resigned her seat. She was appointed to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Senate Foreign Relations Committee approved her nomination back on January 30th, but Kathy Hochul has decided she wants to delay the special election as long as possible. Now, Greg, I keep hearing Republicans are a threat to democracy. In fact, wasn't Chuck Schumer just saying early in this podcast that Chuck Schumer from New York said that Republicans were ruining democracy?
Correct.
Meanwhile, the governor of his state wants to keep Stefanik's district without a representative in Congress for as long as humanly possible. This is less than ideal. I remember hearing democracy dies in darkness. Sometimes somebody just chooses to stab it in broad daylight and nobody notices in that safe. So, my assumption is that once you've got a slightly bigger cushion for Republicans in the House, then it'll be safe for Stefanik to step down from her seat and begin working at the United. She's already giving speeches and kind of, she's in this blurry sort of in the job, sort of not in the job. But anyway, that's how things are looking in the House of Representatives. And stay tuned, because it's been very weird to see this many vacancies this early in a Congress.
Sylvester Turner won the seat that had been vacant because Sheila Jackson Lee died last year. So that's been a lot of upheaval in that particular district in Houston. So in any event, Jim, have a fantastic weekend, and we will reconvene on Monday, St. Patrick's Day. So I'm sure you'll be decked out head to toe in Kelly green.
If only I had some green stuff to wear, rooting for the Jets.
All right. Pint of Guinness then. Pint of Guinness.
Yeah.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already, and tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend, and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.